going all in for some of these teams, but doing so more with depth. We had the Celtics who went out and got Kristaps and Drew Holiday, kind of more on the star end of things. Obviously, both of those guys have been all-stars in the past, but have kind of diminished in recent years to the point where they're more in that kind of Aaron Gordon fringe all-star level. I do think that the Mavs, once again, probably the shining example of this, where they went out and got guys who are just like solid as hell rotation guys who play specific roles to complement what you do. And I wonder, Rob, if that's kind of another sneaky trend that we're talking about here, where it's like, one, you want to go all in and take advantage of the moment when you have someone like Luka, but it actually isn't about getting another star, getting a big three like the Heatles era. It's actually about rounding out what we do.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see how, to flash forward, this could change the way teams operate at the deadline next season, right? The teams that are kind of on the cusp, that are really close, that are feeling really competitive. I just think that the West in particular is so balanced right now, where if you even think that you're kind of in that mix, as the Mavericks prove themselves to be, you should trade for a Daniel Gafford or a PJ Washington. Like you should invest some draft capital to make that work. If you're a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder next time around, I think it probably is time to push some of those chips in and see what you can get, even if they're going to be short-term chips. There never is going to be an absolute perfect time to go all in. But as you're saying, we're seeing teams do it in a more balanced and, I would say, like, secure way. You're not pushing in so much to get a star. You're pushing in moderate assets to get good NBA players who can help you right now. And that might be enough to get you through the Western Conference. It may not be enough to take a decent Eastern Conference team and make them competitive with the Celtics. That margin seems a little bit bigger. But out West, I think there's lots of room for teams to do basically what Dallas did.
Yeah, if you're trying to win a championship, though, like I'm pretty much convinced now that there was a time maybe like 4 or 5 years ago where the emphasis on skill, meaning guys that can pass and shoot and move and were cerebral, like that was the sort of advantage. I think everybody's caught up in that regard. And now you need size and athleticism. Like, this postseason has convinced me that you got to be big, you got to be strong, you got to be fast, you got to be physical. Because everybody's at the point where they're taking enough threes, where they're generating enough quality looks from there, where, you know, the offenses are sophisticated. Even the Wolves, who like have had one of the most, you know, basic sort of offenses, like Naz Reid and Karl Towns were firing that thing up. Ant is firing that thing up. You know, Conley, I would have liked to see fired up a little bit more, but like they as traditional as their size was, like they had guys that were willing to like, all right, I see daylight. This three is going up. To me, man, if you're trying to win a championship, you better be going in the direction of like becoming bigger and stronger and faster. Like, obviously skill still matters. I'm not an idiot, but I think the physicality part, man, like watching Dallas, watching the Wolves, even out East, you know, watching the Knicks get as far as they did. It damn sure wasn't on beautiful, skillful basketball. Yeah. I think it was on physicality and brute force, a lot of it, honestly.
Physicality, yes, but size, no. Right? Like they were undersized, even relative to the Pacers. It was, you know, it's a lot of Josh Hart as an ostensible power forward, like making it work in some of those lineups.
But OG is big as hell for his size.
Yes.
And when Mitch and Hartenstein were playing, like they were playing bigger than Philadelphia was. They was beating up on Joel Embiid. That's what I mean. Like, obviously, like, yeah, totally. On the fringes, like, that's where they got cooked. But, like, I think if they were still able to have their size advantages, you know what I mean? Like, still be physical with OG, still have Mitch, while having Hartenstein, like, they would have beat the Pacers, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
And so, to me, that's what I think they need to be doing. Teams need to be doing.
I wonder if the answer is you just need to have a little bit of everything. I think you need to be more matchup proof than you have in the past, particularly in the West. Like, look at the playoffs we just witnessed, where it felt like there was a little bit more teams beating other teams based on who they were facing, rather than the inevitable champion getting to that point, right?
Yeah.
There's a certain level of inevitability with the NBA that the best teams typically make it to the end point. Whereas now, especially in the Western Conference, but I wonder in the East as well, as those teams kind of get a little bit more healthier and as they load up this offseason, Philly in particular, like I do wonder if it's going to be a little bit more rock, paper, shoot than it has been in the past, where it's like, I wonder if the Mavs had just enough versatility, enough depth to go at a variety of teams. But I also wonder if they got the Nuggets. Maybe the Nuggets are in the finals, but the Nuggets happened to encounter the Wolves before they got to that point.
I want to talk about that, but can we revisit rock, paper, shoot real quick?
Yeah.
What's going on? What's
rock,
going on
paper,
with that?
Scissors say
Rock,
shoot.
paper,
What's going on?
Yeah.
I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure it wasn't
I
just
thought
a
they was doing something
regionalism.
different in Connecticut than
This
they
is
was
what I
in
was
Queens.
wondering.
I was
Okay.
like, okay, they got their own
I'm really
thing
glad
up
we
there.
cleared that up.
We're
But yeah,
traditionalists out there.
Dallas is a fun team to talk about in this regard because going through the Thunder and the Wolves back to back, that's about as different as high-level playoff opponents will get in terms of their personnel and style of play. And the fact that Dallas was able to kind of maneuver to get through both of them, I would say to varying degrees. Honestly, in some ways, Dallas had a harder time with OKC than it did with Minnesota. And you can forecast that into these finals in the sense that the Thunder and the Celtics have a lot more in common than the Celtics and the Wolves do, and what that could mean for Dallas in this matchup. But I think that's been true, generally speaking, for a long time, right? Your ability to be matchup proof, your ability to be adaptable, it kind of ties all these conversations together. Like, yeah, you want to have 48 minutes of good big man play, but maybe you also need these do-it-all 4 types who can be flexible and versatile and give you lots of strategic options. Maybe you also do need some small ball flexibility here and there for the teams that really demand it of you. You do have to be able to do everything and play every way. And most importantly, you have to be able to push the buttons that stress other teams out in that way and test the limits of their team building. That's maybe the most important part of this.
Yeah, I would say 2 recent things that might have kind of messed with the sample that we have here is, one, I think it's tougher to get through the regular season than ever before. On the one hand, you have more opportunities to make it into the postseason with the play-in tournament.
Yeah.
But I do think like regular season has become tough where you can't just coast through. You can't just load up on superstars and then wait until you get to the finals and then your rotation slims down and all of a sudden you're playing like 7 rock solid guys when you had to wade through the Norris Cole minutes and whatnot earlier in the season. I also wonder if like this trade deadline in the offseason before, we saw a lot of teams getting in while the getting was good before the door closed with the second apron and the new CBA, where it's like you saw a lot of activity. I mean, we didn't get a lot of deadline activity. It was actually one of the worst deadlines in recent history, at the point where Alex Burke occupied our thinking for at least like 20 or 30 minutes on a podcast, probably.
This and the
That dude was
deadline
popping
is
up for
crazy.
20 plus in the NBA, like in the playoffs. Like Alec Burks became one of the most important Knicks on the floor.
They had to wait until they only had like 7 guys to play him.
Look, take that up with Tom Thibodeau, all right?
But like we saw a lot of action. Siakam got done. OG got done. We saw a lot of trades leading up to the deadline. I do wonder if a lot of teams loaded up as much as possible because they knew it was going to become really damn difficult later on.
Yeah, and what does that mean for the sort of super team model that is kind of passing out of fashion right now? I would say
The super
Phoenix
team
is probably
model
the closest
is
thing.
a dub. Yeah, they're done. You're done.
But I mean, we'll see what happens with Philly this summer. There's some teams that are in a position to make a run at a 3rd star with the kind of resources that they have going into the offseason. Phoenix, though, like did not have the bodies to be competitive. And I think we're seeing, again, a lot of these conversations coalesce where they didn't have the size, they didn't have the depth. They got swept off the floor against a bigger, deeper team in the Wolves. The Clippers are a kind of a more nuanced conversation. I don't like if Kawhi Leonard gets hurt. I don't think it matters if you have 2 or 3 stars. You're kind of cooked.
Clippers.
So I don't know if that's exactly their
they don't have
problem.
a super team. There's nothing super about that team.
I mean, they certainly look
The
like it in
contracts are
January.
super. Let's say that they got
They're
super
super
contracts.
Yeah. If that's not a super contract, I would love a super contract. Let's see if we can shoot over the line on that one.
Yeah, so we saw a lot. I mean, the Mavs are kind of an outlier in this regard. A lot of teams also aren't doing things with free agents anymore. And so I think Philly is kind of like the team I'm watching going into this offseason, whether or not they will zag back the other way. Kevin Pelton had a really interesting piece on ESPN going into the conference finals where he looked at kind of how each team was built, and only 6 rotation players in the conference finals came via free agent signings. 2 of them were undrafted free agents, Naz Reid, Sam Hauser.
Mm.
And so like clearly these are teams built a different way than we had seen previous, when like even Brooklyn and the Clippers, as Waz is alluding to, a lot of teams are just getting the guy via the draft or via trades, as we've seen, and doing it differently. But the CBA is going to come for all of them. Like we're talking about the Thunder is kind of like a model for success.
I can't
like when
wait
they have to pay
for the
those
CBA to come for them.
But they have to already be careful about who they add as that 5th starter, because they're going to have to pay Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren in like 2 years, and those maxes come earlier than you think. So like in a way, I think like everyone's going to have to worry about this if they have enough great players to pay what they deserve.
Sure, but to me, that gives them 2 years to pay people that are high quality role players. And then when those contracts kick in, all right, we're getting rid of those. We're now developing guys next to our grizzled second contract stars, which I think is a beautiful place to be in, honestly. But it is good. They will have to eventually pivot to filling out their role in a way that the Nuggets tried to do this year, where it's like, yo, we're not going to be extra extravagant with our complementary players, say our bench guys. We're going to try to develop guys. And, you know, one day the OKC Thunder will be there too.
Yeah. Teams are shook about the second apron, though. I got to tell you, like I think it probably is, but either way, it is having the intended effect, right? Even if it's teams operating out of fear, like they are being more conservative with some of that decision making, in a way that makes me look at these NBA finals in which Derek Lively could be one of the most important players on the floor for the Mavs. I don't know whether to think of Lively as the start, part of any kind of trend, any kind of data, as far as like maybe you can draft the right rookie and they can be a part of a winning team right away. They can be a meaningful contributor to a finals team. I tend that he's probably more the like exception that proves the rule in this way.
Bruh.
But if we're talking about going all in,
Luka Doncic, dog.
yes. But here's my thought, Waz, is like if we're talking about teams that they should go all in, there was a lot of pressure on the Mavs to trade that 10th pick for a veteran who would help them now to make an all-in type move.
Oh,
and it
right,
turned out
for
that Derek
DeAndre
Lively,
Ayton, perhaps.
for whoever you may want to propose.
He was tied to the Mavs. I'm not just saying that because I like talking crap. Like, he was actually a guy that people were saying the Mavs might go after. That's why I made that joke.
Totally.
That was a real rumor and a real target, but it turned out that Derek Lively was the better win now move than probably whatever veteran they would have gotten for that pick.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, I tend to think young people just aren't able to contribute much, if anything, but specifically in the NBA. Yeah, to
society
sure.
as well.
But specifically in the NBA, I mean, we see this every year. There aren't a lot of plus rookies. When you look at the ledger, it's like one or two. I think it helps to lean into more of a role-playing type like Lively, where he had a very defined role, and maybe he could expand it over time, where it's like if you needed like a 3-and-D sort of guy, maybe, but if you get into like more of the ball handling range, guys who are actually like managing certain possessions, then it gets a little trickier. But I like that idea in general. Like, do teams, especially in this draft where it's allegedly light on top end talent, do you lean older because you want to get that guy a little farther along? It's an interesting idea.
I don't think teams should do it for the record, but I think some teams will talk themselves into the idea that those rookies will help them right now.
5th year red shirt senior just because you think he's going to contribute to your playoff run. Here's what I'll say about these apron pussies, right?
Yeah. Okay.
First of all,
I yabbed that too soon.
build up a team that's actually a contender. Then worry about, oh man, we can't keep this contender together but for the apron. Build up an actual contender first before you start being scared about an apron, fam. How about that?
Should we get that on a t-shirt? Apron pussies? Throw that out at the live show?
We'll get it to match the hats from the women's marches of 2016, y'all. I was at those marches, by the way. It was nuts. It was gnarly, dude. I was like, whoa, holy moly. I don't think I'm happy about 45, but my Lord.
Well, speaking of apron pussies. No, I do think if I'm going to try to salvage this, I do think Karl Towns and the Wolves are kind of the inflection point, I guess, for how much this matters. Tim Connolly reportedly came back for another year at the very least, as they figure out that ownership situation, getting paid a hearty amount of money. So shouts to him for cashing in on whatever discord is going on between A-Rod and Glenn Taylor. But whether or not they abort on Towns just for the sake of saving money, I think is going to be a real test case for that. There's no reason that they should just completely scrap this team. Like maybe get a different type of player at that salary in order to get like more playmaking, for instance. I could see that. But if it's for anything other than that, it's specifically because of the CBA and because of the tax penalties.